The morning sun painted the Pacific Ocean in shades of gold and blue as Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the USS Defender, a massive destroyer cutting through the calm waters. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her uniform bore the crisp lines of someone who took pride in military precision. At 32, she had already earned more respect than officers twice her age, though most of her crew had no idea about her past life before joining the Navy. The ship was conducting routine training exercises 200 miles off the coast of California. Nearly 300 sailors moved about their duties with practiced efficiency, from the engine rooms deep below to the radar stations high above. Sarah had been assigned as the ship's communications officer 6 months ago, and in that time, she had transformed their radio systems and emergency protocols. Her technical background seemed to come naturally, though she rarely spoke about where she had learned such advanced skills. "Morning, Commander Chen," called out Petty Officer Martinez as he approached her station. "We're getting some unusual readings on the long-range communications array. Nothing serious, but thought you should know." Sarah nodded and followed him to the communications center. The room hummed with electronic equipment, screens displaying everything from weather patterns to satellite feeds. She examined the readings Martinez had flagged, her experienced eyes quickly identifying patterns that others might miss. There was indeed something odd about the signal interference they were detecting. "Run a full diagnostic on array sectors 4 through 7, she instructed, "and pull up the atmospheric conditions for the next 6 hours. Something doesn't feel right." As Martinez began his work, Sarah stepped outside onto the deck. The ocean seemed peaceful enough, but she had learned to trust her instincts. During her years before the military, those instincts had kept her alive in situations most people couldn't imagine. The wind carried a strange charge, and the way the birds were flying in the distance suggested weather changes ahead. Captain Williams emerged from his quarters and approached Sarah. He was a seasoned officer in his 50s, with gray temples and the confident bearing of someone who had commanded ships through dangerous waters. He had quickly learned to value Sarah's insights, even when he couldn't understand where her knowledge came from. "What's your assessment, Chen?" he asked, joining her at the railing. "Something's building, sir. The atmospheric readings suggest we might be looking at more than just a weather front. The electromagnetic interference is unlike anything I've seen in standard meteorological patterns." Captain Williams studied her face. Sarah Chen had a way of seeing problems before they became crises, and he had learned not to question her warnings. "What do you recommend?" "I'd like to run extended diagnostics on all our critical systems, sir. Communications, navigation, engine controls. If we're about to face unusual electromagnetic activity, I want to know our equipment will hold up." "Make it happen," the captain agreed. "And prepare a status report for Fleet Command. If this is something bigger than a local weather event, they need to know." No, another F. As Sarah returned to the communications center, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading into something significant. Her training told her to prepare for multiple scenarios, but her instincts suggested this might be beyond anything the crew had faced before. The ship's executive officer, Commander Davis, appeared at her workstation an hour later. Davis was known for being thorough and skeptical, qualities that made him effective, but sometimes difficult to work with. He had never quite warmed to Sarah, perhaps sensing that she held back parts of her background. "Chen, I'm hearing reports about system checks across the ship. Care to explain why you've got half the crew running diagnostics?" Sarah looked up from her screens, where she was monitoring multiple system readouts simultaneously. "We're detecting unusual electromagnetic patterns, sir. I believe it's prudent to verify our systems are protected before conditions potentially worsen." "These patterns," Davis said, leaning over to examine her data, "they're not matching any weather service predictions I've seen. What makes you think this is more than standard interference?" Sarah hesitated. The truth was that the patterns reminded her of signatures she had encountered during her previous career, when she worked with experimental technology that few people knew existed. But explaining that would mean revealing aspects of her past that she wasn't authorized to discuss. "The frequency patterns and intensity levels are outside normal parameters, sir. Combined with the atmospheric pressure changes, it suggests we may be looking at an unusual electromagnetic event." Davis remained skeptical, But before he could respond further, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The general quarters alarm sent crew members running to their stations as the ship's intercom crackled to life. All hands, all hands. This is the captain. We are experiencing multiple system failures across several departments. All department heads report to the bridge immediately. Sarah's heart rate increased, but her training kicked in automatically. She quickly secured her stations and headed toward the bridge, her mind already running through emergency protocols. As she moved through the ship's corridors, she could see crew members working frantically at various stations, their faces showing the controlled concern of professionals facing an unexpected crisis. The bridge was buzzing with activity when she arrived. Officers were calling out reports from different stations, while Captain Williams stood in the center, trying to coordinate responses to multiple simultaneous problems. Engineering reports, loss of primary power coupling, announced the engineering officer. We're running on backup systems, but they won't hold indefinitely. Navigation systems are showing erratic readings, added the navigator. GPS is unreliable, and our compass is spinning like a top. Communications with Fleet Command are down, reported Martinez. Short-range radio is working, but everything long distance is just static. Captain Williams turned to Sarah. Chen, you predicted this. What are we dealing with? Sarah moved to the main communications console and began rapidly checking different systems. Her fingers flew over the controls with the efficiency of someone who understood the technology at a fundamental level. What she saw confirmed her worst fears. Sir, we're experiencing what appears to be a massive electromagnetic pulse event, but it's not behaving like anything in our standard references. The patterns suggest it's building in intensity rather than dissipating. Could this be some kind of weapon? Asked Commander Davis. Unlikely, sir. The signature is too broad and unfocused. This appears to be a natural phenomenon, but one that's far more intense than anything our systems were designed to handle. As if to emphasize her point, more alarms began sounding. The lights flickered, and several screens went dark before emergency power brought them back online. Through the bridge windows, they could see strange lights beginning to appear in the sky. Aurora-like displays that had no business appearing at their latitude during daylight hours. Sir, called out the radar officer. I'm showing multiple aircraft approaching from the east. They appear to be military, but I can't get clear identification due to the electromagnetic interference. Captain Williams picked up his binoculars and scanned the horizon. Within minutes, he could make out the distinctive shapes of two F-22 Raptors approaching the ship. The advanced stealth fighters were flying in formation, their presence suggesting that whatever was happening was significant enough to warrant Air Force involvement. Try to establish radio contact with those aircraft, the captain ordered. Sarah worked at the communications board, adjusting frequencies and power levels to try to cut through the interference. After several attempts, she managed to establish a crackling connection. Unknown aircraft. This is USS Defender. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions. The response came back filled with static but understandable. USS Defender. This is Falcon Flight. Two F-22 Raptors out of Edwards Air Force Base. We've been dispatched to assess the electromagnetic anomaly in your area. Request permission to establish air-to-ship coordination. Captain Williams took the microphone. Falcon Flight. This is Captain Williams commanding USS Defender. Permission granted. We're experiencing multiple system failures due to what appears to be an intense electromagnetic event. Copy that, Defender. We're seeing the same thing up here. Our instruments are going crazy, and we're having trouble maintaining stable flight control systems. This thing is bigger than anything Command expected. As the F-22 seconds circled overhead, the situation on the ship continued to deteriorate. More systems were failing, and the crew was being pushed to their limits, trying to maintain basic operations. Sarah found herself moving between different stations, using her knowledge to help teams diagnose and work around failing equipment. Commander Chen, called Captain Williams, I need your honest assessment. Can we get out of this? Sarah looked around the bridge, taking in the chaos and the determined faces of her fellow officers. She thought about everything the ship and crew meant, not just to the Navy but to the families waiting for their return. Her past experience had taught her that sometimes survival required thinking beyond conventional solutions. "Sir, we need to completely rethink our approach. These systems are failing because they're trying to operate normally in abnormal conditions. We need to adapt them to work with the electromagnetic environment rather than against it." "What does that mean in practical terms?" Sarah took a deep breath. What she was about to suggest would require revealing knowledge she had kept hidden for years, but the lives of her crew were more important than protecting her secrets. "Give me full authority over all communications and electronic systems, sir. I believe I can modify our equipment to not only survive this event, but potentially use it to our advantage." The bridge fell silent, except for the sound of alarms and failing systems. Captain Williams studied Sarah's face, seeing a confidence there that went deeper than standard naval training. "You have it, Commander. Whatever you need." As Sarah moved toward the communications center with renewed purpose, she knew that the real test was just beginning. The electromagnetic storm was intensifying. The ship's systems were failing faster than they could be repaired, and somehow she had to find a way to save nearly 300 lives, using knowledge from a past she had never fully explained to anyone. Sarah moved through the ship with purpose, her mind racing through calculations and possibilities that drew from knowledge she had hoped never to use again. The electromagnetic storm was intensifying by the minute, and traditional naval procedures were proving useless against the unprecedented phenomenon. As she descended into the lower levels of the ship, crew members looked to her with a mixture of hope and desperation. "Martinez, gather every technician with electronics experience," she called out as she entered the main communications bay. "I don't care what their regular duties are. And I need access to the ship's central power distribution system." "Ma'am, that requires engineering approval," Martinez replied, his voice tight with stress. "The captain gave me full authority. Make the calls." Within minutes, Sarah had assembled a team of 12 sailors with varying levels of technical expertise. She looked at their faces, seeing the fear they were trying to hide behind their professional demeanor. The ship was shaking now, not from ocean swells but from the electromagnetic forces playing havoc with their metal hull. "Listen carefully," Sarah began, her voice cutting through the noise of failing systems. "Everything you know about electromagnetic shielding and circuit protection is based on standard threats. What we're facing is different. Instead of trying to block these forces, we're going to channel them." Petty Officer Jackson, an experienced electronics technician, raised his hand. "Commander, that goes against every safety protocol we've learned. Channeling this kind of power could fry every system on the ship." "It could," Sarah agreed. "But if we do nothing, we're going to lose life support within the hour. The electromagnetic field is building to a point where it will overload our emergency systems too." She moved to a large schematic display showing the ship's electrical systems. With quick, precise movements, she began marking specific junction points and pathways. Her knowledge of the ship's systems was impressive, but what struck the team was how she seemed to understand the electromagnetic phenomenon itself. "We're going to create a controlled pathway for the electromagnetic energy to flow through the ship without damaging critical systems. Think of it like lightning rods, but instead of directing energy away, we're directing it through specific channels we can control." "How do you know this will work?" asked Martinez. Sarah paused, knowing that her next words would change how these people saw her forever. "Because I've worked with similar technology before. In situations I'm not authorized to discuss. You're going to have to trust me." The team exchanged glances, but the sound of another system failure somewhere in the ship made their decision for them. They began working under Sarah's direction, rerouting cables and modifying circuit boards with techniques that weren't taught in any Navy manual. Sarah's instructions were precise and confident, drawing from experience that seemed to go far beyond standard military training. Meanwhile, on the bridge, Captain Williams was coordinating with the F-22 pilots overhead. The fighters were struggling with their own systems, their advanced computers barely able to maintain stable flight in the intensifying electromagnetic field. "Defender. This is Falcon Lead." The voice crackled through the radio. "We're seeing readings up here that don't match anything in our databases. Whatever this phenomenon is, it's growing exponentially." "Copy that, Falcon Lead. Our people are working on a solution. How are your aircraft holding up?" "We're flying on backup systems, and even those are getting unreliable." If this keeps building, we may have to return to base while we still can. Captain Williams understood the implication. If the F-22 seconds had to leave, the USS Defender would be alone in whatever was coming. He picked up the internal communication system. "Commander Chen, what's your status?" Sarah's voice came back immediately, though it was strained with concentration. "Sir, we're about to begin the final phase of the modification. I need everyone not directly involved in life support systems to shut down their equipment and stand by. All stations, this is the captain," Williams announced throughout the ship. "Prepare for emergency system shutdown. All non-essential personnel report to central corridors and await further instructions." In the communications bay, Sarah was making the final connections in what looked like a jury-rigged network of cables and modified circuit boards. Her team had worked with an efficiency born of desperation, following her instructions even when they didn't fully understand the theory behind them. "Commander," said Jackson nervously, "if this doesn't work, then we're no worse off than we would be doing nothing," Sarah replied. "But it will work. I've seen this principle applied before, just never on this scale." She moved to a central control panel that she had modified with additional switches and monitoring equipment. The electromagnetic readings were off the charts now, and through the ship's hull, they could hear a low humming sound that seemed to come from the very air around them. "All stations, prepare for electromagnetic channeling procedure," Sarah announced over the ship's communication system. "This may cause temporary power fluctuations throughout the vessel." Her hand hovered over the main activation switch. Everything depended on her calculations being correct, and on modifications that pushed the ship's systems far beyond their designed capabilities. She thought briefly of the crew members trusting her with their lives, of the families waiting for them to return home. She pressed the switch. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the ship's lights dimmed as power began flowing through the new pathways Sarah had created. The humming sound changed pitch, becoming more musical than threatening. Slowly, systematically, the modified electrical grid began channeling the electromagnetic energy in controlled patterns throughout the ship. "It's working," Martinez whispered, watching displays that showed power flowing in stable, controlled patterns, instead of the chaotic surges they had been experiencing. But Sarah wasn't finished. She moved to her communication station and began adjusting frequencies and power levels with rapid precision. "Falcon Flight, this is USS Defender. Please respond." "Defender, this is Falcon Lead. We're reading you loud and clear. How did you clean up the communications?" "We've modified our systems to work with the electromagnetic field instead of against it," Sarah replied. "I'm going to transmit a frequency modulation pattern to you. If you can modify your radio systems to match it, you should be able to maintain stable communications and navigation." There was a pause from the F-22 pilots. "Defender, our systems aren't designed for field modifications like that," Sarah smiled grimly. "Falcon Lead, what's your background before the Air Force?" "I was an electrical engineer." "Why? Then you'll understand what I'm about to explain. The electromagnetic field is creating a resonance pattern. Instead of fighting it, you need to synchronize your systems with it." Over the next 20 minutes, Sarah guided the F-22 pilots through a series of adjustments to their avionics systems. Her knowledge was detailed and specific, covering aspects of electromagnetic theory that weren't typically part of pilot training. The Air Force officers found themselves following instructions that were clearly coming from someone with deep technical expertise. "Defender, this is incredible," came the voice of Falcon 2. "Our navigation systems are not only stable, they're more accurate than before. How did you know this would work?" "Experience with similar phenomena," Sarah replied carefully. As the ship's systems stabilized, crew members throughout the vessel began reporting successful equipment operation. The emergency was passing, but everyone understood that Sarah's modifications had saved not just the ship, but potentially the lives of everyone aboard. Captain Williams arrived in the communications bay to find Sarah coordinating with multiple departments, ensuring that all systems were properly integrated with her new electromagnetic management network. She looked exhausted but focused, her uniform showing signs of the intensive work she had been doing in tight spaces with electrical equipment. "Commander Chen," the captain said quietly, I think we need to have a conversation about your background. Sarah looked up from her displays. Sir, I've never violated any security regulations or failed to disclose required information. I'm not questioning your integrity. But what you've accomplished here goes far beyond standard Navy training. The modifications you've made, the knowledge you displayed, this isn't something you learned in communications officer school. Before Sarah could respond, the radio crackled with a new transmission from the F-22 seconds. USS Defender, this is Falcon Lead. We're receiving orders to escort you to coordinates that will be transmitted separately. Our command wants to debrief whoever figured out how to turn this electromagnetic storm into a navigation advantage. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. She had hoped to avoid attention from higher command levels, but saving the ship had made that impossible. The technical knowledge she had displayed would certainly trigger questions from people with high security clearances. Falcon Lead, understood. We're ready to receive coordinates. As the new course information came through, Sarah realized that their destination was not a standard naval base. The coordinates indicated a facility that she recognized from her previous career, a place where questions would be asked that she couldn't avoid answering. The ship began changing course, its systems now running more smoothly than they had in months thanks to Sarah's modifications. The electromagnetic storm was beginning to dissipate, but the effects of what had happened would be felt for much longer. Commander Chen, Captain Williams said, whatever your background is, you saved this ship and crew today. But I suspect this is just the beginning of something bigger. Quote, Sarah nodded, watching the F-22 seconds maintain their escort formation overhead. She had successfully pulled off the ship-wide save. But in doing so, she had revealed capabilities that would inevitably lead to questions about her past. The electromagnetic storm was over, but she sensed that a different kind of storm was about to begin. As the USS Defender sailed toward its new destination under F-22 escort, crew members throughout the ship spoke in hushed tones about what they had witnessed. Their communications officer had displayed knowledge and skills that seemed to come from a very different world than the Navy they knew. And soon, everyone would learn just how different that world had been. The USS Defender approached the coordinates provided by the F-22 escorts as the sun began to set over the Pacific. What had started as a routine training exercise had transformed into something that would be discussed in classified briefings for years to come. Sarah stood on the bridge, watching their destination take shape on the horizon, a facility that brought back memories she had tried to leave behind. That's Naval Air Weapons Station China Lake, observed Commander Davis, studying the approaching coastline through binoculars. What would they want with a ship's communications officer? Captain Williams glanced at Sarah, noting the tension in her posture. I suspect we're about to find out. The F-22 seconds had maintained their escort formation throughout the journey, their pilots maintaining professional radio chatter but clearly curious about the unusual mission they had been assigned. As they approached the naval station, additional aircraft appeared in the sky, more F-22 seconds, along with some aircraft that Sarah recognized as experimental variants, not typically seen by conventional Navy personnel. USS Defender, this is China Lake Control, came a new voice over the radio. You are cleared for approach to Pier 7. A debriefing team will be standing by. As the ship maneuvered into position, Sarah could see a small group of people waiting on the pier. Even from a distance, she could tell they were not regular Navy personnel. Their bearing and the way they observed the approaching vessel suggested intelligence or special operations backgrounds. Commander Chen, Captain Williams said quietly, before we dock, I need to ask you directly. What exactly is your background before the Navy? Sarah had known this moment would come eventually. The electromagnetic incident had forced her to use knowledge and skills that couldn't be explained by her official service record. She looked at the approaching pier, then back at her commanding officer. Sir, I was part of a classified aerospace program from 2018 to 2021. The details are beyond my clearance level to discuss. But the technical knowledge I use today came from that experience. What kind of aerospace program? Advanced aircraft development and testing, sir. I can't say more without proper authorization. As the ship completed docking procedures, Sarah could see the debriefing team more clearly. She recognized two faces from her previous career. Colonel Matthews from Air Force Special Projects, and Dr. Sajan, Sarah Mitchell from the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Their presence confirmed her suspicions about why they had been brought to China Lake. The debriefing took place in a secure conference room within the Naval Station's administrative building. Present were Captain Williams, Sarah, Colonel Matthews, Dr. Mitchell, and a Navy intelligence officer who introduced himself simply as Commander Johnson. Through the room's windows, Sarah could see the F-22 pilots from their escort mission walking across the tarmac toward the building. "Commander Chen," Colonel Matthews began, "your actions today have raised some interesting questions. The electromagnetic management technique you employed is remarkably similar to classified technologies developed in programs you were previously associated with." "Yes, sir. I adapted principles I learned during my time in the Blackbird program." Dr. Mitchell leaned forward. "The modifications you made to both the ship's systems and the F-22 avionics demonstrate a level of understanding that goes beyond theoretical knowledge. You've clearly had hands-on experience with similar technology." "That's correct, ma'am." Commander Johnson consulted his notes. "According to your service record, you transitioned directly from the Air Force to the Navy without any gap in service. The Blackbird program officially ended in 2021, which aligns with your transfer date. All the off." Captain Williams, who had been listening intently, spoke up. "Gentlemen, with all due respect, I'm more interested in what this means for my ship and crew going forward. Commander Chen saved nearly 300 lives today using unconventional methods." "We understand that, Captain," Dr. Mitchell replied. "But the implications of what happened today extend beyond your ship. The electromagnetic phenomenon you encountered was not entirely natural." The room fell silent. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. If the electromagnetic event had been artificial, it suggested possibilities she didn't want to consider. "Ma'am, are you saying this was some kind of test or attack?" Captain Williams asked. "We're still investigating," Colonel Matthews replied. "But the frequency patterns and intensity levels match theoretical models for electromagnetic warfare systems that several nations have been developing." There was a knock at the conference room door, and the two F-22 pilots from the escort mission entered. Both were still in their flight suits, their faces showing a mixture of curiosity and professional concern. "Sir, you requested to speak with us after our debriefing?" said the lead pilot. "Yes, Major Thompson, Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez. We wanted you to meet the person who helped solve your avionics problems during the electromagnetic event." The pilots looked at Sarah with interest. Major Thompson extended his hand. "Ma'am, we owe you a debt of gratitude. What you did for our systems was remarkable. I'm curious about your technical background." Sarah shook his hand, noting the confident grip of an experienced pilot. "I'm glad I could help, Major. The frequency modulation technique you taught us," Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez added. "It's not in any of our technical manuals. Where did you learn something like that?" Dr. Mitchell interrupted. "Perhaps we should start with proper introductions. Commander Chen, would you tell these officers about your previous assignment?" Sarah looked around the room, realizing that her carefully maintained privacy was about to end completely. "I was a test pilot and systems engineer in the Air Force's Blackbird program from 2018 to 2021. Major Thompson raised an eyebrow. "The Blackbird program? I thought that was just rumors and speculation." "It was very real," Colonel Matthews confirmed. "Commander Chen was one of our most experienced test pilots before transitioning to the Navy." Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez studied Sarah's face more carefully. "Wait a minute. If you were in the Blackbird program, you would have had a call sign. What was your call sign?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah had hoped to avoid this moment, but she could see that there was no way around it now. Her call sign had been legendary in certain circles, known to every serious pilot in the experimental aircraft community. "My call sign was Ghost," Sarah said quietly. The effect on the two F-22 pilots was immediate and dramatic. Major Thompson's mouth actually fell open, while Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez stepped back as if he had been physically struck. They stared at Sarah in complete silence for several seconds. Your ghost? Major Thompson finally whispered. The ghost who flew the Aurora missions? The ghost who broke the altitude record in the X-43 variant, Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez added, his voice filled with awe. And set the speed record that's still classified? Major Thompson continued. Sarah nodded, uncomfortable with the attention but unable to deny facts that were clearly known to these pilots. Gentlemen, Dr. Mitchell interjected. I take it you're familiar with Commander Chen's reputation. Ma'am, every pilot in the Air Force knows about Ghost, Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez replied. The stories. We thought some of them had to be exaggerated. Like flying a prototype aircraft at Mach 6 through a thunderstorm to test electromagnetic shielding, Major Thompson asked, looking directly at Sarah. That one was real, Sarah confirmed. And it's directly related to what I did today. The electromagnetic management principles are the same. Colonel Matthews cleared his throat. This is exactly why we needed this debriefing. Commander Chen's background makes her uniquely qualified to understand what happened during today's incident. Captain Williams looked at Sarah with new respect. I'm beginning to understand why you seemed so calm during the crisis. You've faced situations like this before. Similar, but not identical. Sarah replied. Today's electromagnetic event was more intense than anything I encountered during test flights. Dr. Mitchell pulled out a classified folder and opened it carefully. Which brings us to our real concern. The electromagnetic signature from today matches theoretical projections for a weapon system called Project Stormfront, which intelligence suggests is being developed by hostile nations. Are you saying we were attacked? Captain Williams asked. We don't think it was an attack, Colonel Matthews replied. More likely it was a test of the system. And your ship happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Major Thompson was still staring at Sarah. Ma'am, I have to ask the Aurora program, the X-43 variants, the classified altitude records, how much of that technology is incorporated into current F-22 systems? Some of it, Sarah replied. The frequency modulation techniques I taught you today are directly derived from systems I tested in 2020. This is unbelievable, Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez muttered. We've been flying aircraft that incorporate technology you helped develop. And we never knew it. Commander Johnson finally spoke up, which raises security questions that need to be addressed. Commander Chen, your transition to the Navy was approved at the highest levels, but your current assignment may need to be reconsidered. What do you mean? Captain Williams asked sharply. Someone with Commander Chen's background and knowledge represents a significant security asset, Dr. Mitchell explained. The question is whether she's most valuable continuing her current duties or returning to specialized programs. Sarah had been dreading this possibility. Her time in the Navy had given her a sense of normalcy that she valued deeply. The thought of returning to the high-stress, highly classified world of experimental aircraft was not appealing. With respect, ma'am, I prefer my current assignment, Sarah said. I joined the Navy to serve in a different capacity, but today proved that your specialized knowledge can save lives in ways that conventional training cannot, Colonel Matthews pointed out. Your actions saved not just your ship, but provided crucial intelligence about potential threats to national security. Major Thompson stepped forward. Commander Chen Ghost, I don't know if it's appropriate for me to say this, but it's an honor to have worked with you today. Even remotely, the reputation you earned in the test pilot community is legendary. Thank you, Major. But I hope you understand why I prefer to focus on my current duties rather than past achievements. Of course, ma'am. But today showed that the past and present sometimes intersect in unexpected ways. The meeting continued for another hour, with discussions about security protocols, potential reassignments, and the ongoing investigation into the electromagnetic event. Throughout it all, the two F-22 pilots remained somewhat in awe of finding themselves in the same room as someone whose exploits had become legend in their community. As the debriefing concluded, Major Thompson approached Sarah one final time. Ma'am, I know this might sound strange, but would you be willing to sign something for me? I have a nephew who wants to be a pilot, and knowing that Ghost personally helped us today, it would mean a lot to him. Sarah smiled, the first genuinely relaxed expression she had shown all day. Of course, Major. But let's just keep it between us that Ghost is now serving as a Navy communications officer. Some transitions are better left private. Understood completely, ma'am. As they prepared to return to the USS Defender, Sarah realized that her carefully maintained secret identity was now known to more people than she was comfortable with. But looking at the respect in the eyes of her fellow officers, and remembering the lives that had been saved that day, she accepted that some secrets were worth revealing when the stakes were high enough. The electromagnetic storm had passed, but Sarah Chen, call sign Ghost, knew that her quiet service in the Navy would never be quite the same again.